Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast here on Tuesday, June 22nd. Michael Beller, Jake Seeley, and Brandon Funston here with you. Guys, we've got a lot to get to today. We are going to be focused on some passing games. I thought that would be a fun thing to talk about. I want to talk about some running backs also as we get a little bit closer. Maybe we save that for next week, but going to focus on some passing games here today. We've also got our usual Guess That Player going on throughout the show, so be paying attention to those clues, and especially pay attention to those clues for one special reason that we will bring up in just a second. But first, Jake, Brandon, how you guys doing today?
Well, good.
Good. No complaints. It's a little early. I guess I could complain. I'm still getting the sleep out of my eye, but yeah, I'm excited. Excited to talk some passing games.
Yeah, right. There's when I was going through, I just felt like there were some passing games that have some clear excitement to them, but we need to talk about them a little bit and figure out exactly how they are going to shake out. And that's what we're going to do in just a second here. But first, some other exciting news, as maybe you've seen on Twitter over the last day or two. We've been talking about the fact that we're going to give away a spot in the Scott Fish Bowl, the 11th year of the Scott Fish Bowl taking place here in 2021. We will be giving away a spot to SFB 11 on this episode of the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. So here is how it is going to work. Here's how to get yourself in the drawing to get that spot into Scott Fish Bowl. First step, you need to rate and review this podcast wherever it might be that you listen to us. Rate, review, take a screenshot of that. And then, in addition to that, please answer our trivia question, our Guess That Player, as we go through the show. So screenshot that rating and review. Put that in a tweet to me at MBeller, Jake at Kid, Brandon at Brandon Funston, along with an answer to our Guess That Player. We will do a random drawing for all the people who have both rated and reviewed and answered the question correctly. And by Thursday, we will have someone selected. So I'll go over that a couple more times throughout the show, but have that in mind as we are going through it. And let's get started with Guess That Player. Clue number one. This is a day where we're going to be talking about passing games, so felt appropriate to do a wide receiver for today. Clue number one, I've been a top 15 wide receiver in half PPR scoring each of the last 3 seasons, peaking at wide receiver number 8. We will come back to Guess That Player a few more times throughout the show. We are going to start our episode with the Arizona Cardinals. And guys, this is one that, they add AJ Green, they draft Rondale Moore. We know DeAndre Hopkins is the guy who is at the center of this. And so I'm going to throw up the question here, DeAndre Hopkins, and then what happens next, Jake?
What happens next is don't bother trying to predict it, is what happens next. I think that we all expect AJ Green to not have much excuse me, left. But if he does, it's just going to be a factor of targets anyway. It's not like he's coming into this offense, even if you look at what he did last year with the Bengals, and not command at least 80 plus targets, if not more. So you have AJ Green in the mix. You have Christian Kirk, who should move back to the slot where he does his best work still. There's Sterling Shepard. He's still going to get his targets. We can love on Moore all we want. Andy Isabella's still there. There's just plenty of options where it's kind of just DeAndre Hopkins and everybody else. Like, it's just avoid the mess. It's kind of the Jets without DeAndre Hopkins. Is don't try and figure it out. Just take the cheapest one and hope the cheapest one breaks out for you.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is just plug AJ Green into Larry Fitzgerald's target share, which was at around 15%, and DeAndre Hopkins was among the most, highly targeted players in the league at like around 29%. So, if you do that and Christian Kirk gets his 15%, and then you look at, the bottom feeders, I think that's where you're going to have to expect Rondale Moore. Can he take some of Andy Isabella's and some of Dan Arnold's and some of Keyshawn Johnson's and put together like 10%? There's just not a lot left when you start to look at it that way. So I think this is still DeAndre Hopkins, clear, far away alpha, and the others are just going to have to kind of fight for the scraps.
Rondale Moore is an interesting guy to me on this team because of the fact that, we came into the season, or we came into the draft, and obviously, AJ Green is there. They already have Christian Kirk, who does his best work, as you said, Jake, out of the slot. And so you're looking at this team. They've got an alpha wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. They just used a second-round pick in 2019 on Andy Isabella. So, it didn't seem like, obviously things haven't happened for him, but that was still some high draft capital just a couple of years ago. And then they used a second-round pick on Rondale Moore, and it should am I reading too much into this, Jake, by looking at Rondale Moore and saying they wouldn't use this pick if they didn't want to use him right away in the ways they made him very exciting when he was at Purdue?
Yes, because it's depth for this team, because AJ Brown's not the long-term solution. Not every rookie wide receiver comes in and has any impact as a rookie, let alone, I would say, but 80% of them don't matter. It's just when I talk about fantasy purposes, they'll get some targets, they'll be involved, they'll make the team as a whole better. But similar to Bateman with the Ravens, sure, he can make the team better, but for fantasy, it doesn't matter. It's simple math. It's simple target share, simple target percentage. It's simple the fact that with the best case scenarios, we hope he leapfrogs 3 people. We could say from day one, we expect him to be better than AJ Green, but AJ Green wasn't brought in to not play, even if he doesn't look great. Christian Kirk is still essentially, you could argue, the number 2 when you balance out targets, opportunity, talent, and who's, all that type of stuff right now. So he has to get past Kirk, he has to get past Green. And I'm even saying that with the fact that he should probably get past Andy Isabella. Whether you're differentiating on that is because I do think he's a better prospect than Isabella. I was surprised Isabella went as high as he did. I thought he was kind of like a Mike Wallace. Hopefully that's what he turns into type of guy. But all that being said, is there's a lot to overcome here for a team that also loves 3 and 4 wide receivers. And then who knows, maybe they get some tight end involvement this year with, you just never know. But again, even if that doesn't happen, it's simple math. And that's the fact, is not every rookie wide receiver is brought in. The Giants brought in Kadarius Toney to make him, hey, this makes the team better, but let's think about next year when Sterling Shepard, clears almost $11 million off the books by getting rid of him. Some of these picks even being second rounders or for year 2 plus.
I feel like with Max Williams and Darrell Daniels that the Dan Arnold 8% target share is probably just going away at the tight end position and being distributed elsewhere. One thing I wanted to bring up though, and I just want to philosophically talk about Kyler Murray because it kind of relates to my guy here in the Northwest and Russell Wilson, and what they're going to be trying to do is it's easier for shorter quarterbacks to throw to the outside and to drop back and to throw a little bit deeper. But if you want to use Rondale Moore the way that I think he would work best in the system, it's a lot of quick slants off the line of scrimmage and things where you're going to have to be throwing into the teeth of the defensive line, especially on the edges where the big guys are. And I wonder if that's going to be a tough fit and a hard thing for Kyler Murray to do, because I wonder the same thing about Russell Wilson in implementing a lot of the Rams kind of philosophies on offense as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair question for Kyler Murray as they look at this and how he's going to work with Rondale Moore. Kyler Murray, however, no matter what, looking like a top 5 quarterback. Another guy who's captaining a very interesting passing game we're going to talk about, looking like a top 5 quarterback, is Dak Prescott. And let's get to those Dallas Cowboys. We know that they've got the 3 big receivers, or at least the 2 big receivers, and then Michael Gallup. We talked a little bit last week about Amari Cooper having the ankle issues. Already some questions about, will he be ready for the start of training camp? How much training camp will he participate in? Question, put it to you here first, Brandon. Is this as simple as Amari's the 1, CeeDee's the 2, Gallup's the 3?
I guess, we had to watch how it was an ankle injury, right, with Amari. We got to kind of see how that plays out. I think we talked about that in our last podcast and when we would start to worry about it, which is not yet, but we'll wait and see how that goes. But I think it's that simple, sort of. Gallup, maybe, Blake Jarwin's back. I know Jake's a big Blake Jarwin fan, and maybe, if we could see some of that, some of these guys' targets moved a little bit towards the tight end a little bit more than last year, but I think as far as the hierarchy, I still see it as in that order, assuming that Amari Cooper is healthy. And it might just be really close between Cooper and CeeDee Lamb this year, and then I still think Gallup's probably a distant third.
Yeah, so I'd say the only difference there is I would say no, because the fact is the door is open for Lamb to be the number 1. And that just because, Lamb talent-wise with Cooper, like even if Cooper's 100%, I think you could see both of them finish neck and neck, honestly. You would possibly even see like Lamb finish wide receiver 10 and Cooper 12. And then it's like, okay, who really cares? Like that's the conversation we've already had before. But what Brandon said, I think that's the concern, is like, we're talking about an injury that's a long time ago now that had surgery that has been taken, and he's still dealing with issues from it, which just leads to the hesitation of drafting. And you see it in ADP. right now, and yes, it's a super early late ADP, and it could be skewed by 1 week of people going crazy on Twitter. But Lamb is a fringe wide receiver 1 right now, and Cooper is down in the low teens. People are scared for the same reason. And if it finished that way, I wouldn't be shocked. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Lamb finishes 3rd. I wouldn't put money on it. But when you have 3 talents like this, I think you're looking at, I drew the comparison to the Panthers for a different situation on the worst side of things, but this is kind of where I could see the Panthers on the better side of things. Instead of all finishing inside the top 30, all 3 of them could finish inside the top 24. And who they're really, like, how upset would we really be anyway?
Yeah. I don't think anyone would be complaining too much about that. We do talk a lot about ankle, foot, and lower half injuries really cropping up and being a problem for wide receivers. So that Amari Cooper one it's early. It's June 22nd. We're still a month away from training camp's opening, but that's something we're going to have our eye on day one and throughout Dallas training camp until we see something meaningful from Amari Cooper. Brandon, you bring up Blake Jarwin. You mentioned that Jake's a fan. So, Jake, what is the Blake Jarwin role in this offense? If we assume that all 3 receivers are generally healthy for the balance of the season, is there room for Blake Jarwin to
wait, how did I become Jarwin's fan? Where did this come from?
I'm taking Brandon's lead on this.
I know. I'm asking Brandon. Where, like,
well, it's a combination of all the different little snippets I've read that you've written about Blake Jarwin. You've always been on the rosier side of things, never really thrown him.
Your editor knows you better than you know yourself, Jake. Right. Everyone knows
I think
this.
I've written about him twice. First of all,
both times semi positively.
No, one of them was quite positively, but I also threw cold water on him at the same time. You know that. It was similar to the Irv Smith. You're talking about the breakout tight ends, and just talking about the fact that he wasn't included, though, because I said he's a bounce back, not a breakout.
Right.
For the fact that, like,
you're talking about he's going to have a bounce back season.
But I even said, similar to Irv Smith, is don't get your hopes up too high because the other person's not going to go away. Like, if what Dalton Schultz did last year is good and bad, and this is actually what I said when I was talking about Jarwin, it's good and bad. Is Schultz showed why we had the excitement for Blake Jarwin last year. And Blake Jarwin, talent-wise, if you told me Jarwin versus Schultz, I'm taking Jarwin every single time. That's not the question here. So you see what can be brought into this offense, even with poor quarterback play, even with 3 amazing wide receivers who are going to command all the targets. But you still have Zeke in the mix. And yes, it still happened last year with Schultz, but Schultz wasn't a top 10 tight end. And now Schultz did enough where the cold water is maybe he's not left out this year. Maybe they get him involved. And so, yeah, I mean, I like Blake Jarwin. I actually wish he was on a different team. But yeah, I'm not his boy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Hard to push him.
To say, I mean, he's a guy we might consider a Scott Fishbowl, but that's in 2 tight end setups. But yeah, as far as
2 tight end setups, maybe.
I haven't even looked at the rules yet because they change every year.
Tight end premium.
Tight end premium, or like, what is it? Like full PPR point scoring for tight ends versus half PPR for the rest.
Is it super flex still?
It is.
It is.
Wow, this guy's giving away a Scott Fishbowl spot on his own show today, and he doesn't even know the own rules. Unbelievable.
I'll look him up before we draft.
There's an interesting wrinkle to it this year as well, which I guess we can bring up in the and I'm giving away further stuff in this show, but we are going to be talking about some fantasy wrinkles that we enjoy, so I'll bring it up later.
We might actually have to save that for next week because we got a lot of passing games to talk about, and there's a lot to get into with that. But either way, we can bring it up. We can talk about it when we're getting into the Guess That Player segment, at least when we talk about that later in the show. I do want to talk right now about the Miami Dolphins. This is a team that I think is maybe the most interesting when we look at the passing game because of the new additions and the big unknown of what Tua Tagovailoa is going to be in his second year, his first year where he knows right from the jump, I am the starting quarterback. Made some big moves in the passing game this offseason. They go out, they draft Jaylen Waddle, they add Will Fuller. They still have Devontae Parker there. They still have Preston Williams there. They have some backs who are going to work into the mix. Mike Gesicki, still part of this whole thing. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here, but it's exciting. It's all exciting around Tua. Jake, when you look at this passing game, what's your first impression when you look at the Miami Dolphins top to bottom and how they're going to be using these pass catchers?
I was glad you changed it. You ruined my answer. Like you're gonna say, what's your first thought? And I said my first thought was I'm tired of talking about him already. Like, but because my first thought is positivity. This goes down to my breakout quarterbacks when I talk about Tua and I talk about Jalen Hurts, and I say tired of talking about it. And people might not have heard me say this before, and that's why I just feel like people are like, all right, Jake, we've heard you say this 10 times already. But it was what I keep bringing up is they straddled the fence with Tua last year. They tried to somewhat change the offense for him, but not overhaul it because Fitzpatrick was still in the mix. And then they benched him for Fitzpatrick and put him back in there. And trying to go back and forth with Tua just didn't help Tua as a rookie, not to mention the fact you had Devontae Parker, who took a step back, who was trying to adjust to the same offense and then trying to adjust to Tua, which are factors. Preston Williams didn't fit and got hurt. And now you're left with Jakeem Grant and all the rest of them as options. So now you spend the entire offseason and stop straddling the fence and have the offense for Tua. You have Devontae Parker, who can now step back and not be the guy because you have Will Fuller, and you also drafted, oh, by the way, the guy who played with Tua, and it looks like a great option to fit his style in Jaylen Waddle. For everybody that talks about Tua's passes and downfields, does everybody forget the giant play that Tua threw to Waddle in college that won a national championship? Like, people have already
remember it.
Yeah, people have already written and closed the book on a half season of Tua because of so many things that were wrong for him last year. So I am excited for this entire offense. This is one of the ones that I keep comparing to the Panthers, and Brandon knows this. And I think that's why you were shaking your head. Like, this is the one where it's like, hey, Will Fuller, Jaylen Waddle, and Devontae Parker could all finish like top 40 wide receivers. But the problem for us in fantasy is I think there's going to be a lot of inconsistency. If I think I was going for the most consistent one, it would probably be Parker, but he could finish last as overall points.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot left to say about this situation.
See, that's why I said I'm tired of talking about it, because I feel like I take up everything to talk about.
I think just terms as fantasy, like, you would think this is kind of a team with a really good defense that they would have been like targeting a Najee Harris, and like Tua becomes game manager and you're hitting these guys off of play action and you're winning with defense and just not turning the ball over and just smash mouth. But they kind of have set up for Tua to throw the ball a lot because Myles Gaskin's he's not a bell cow. I mean, he's had some moments where they've been giving him that, but you don't really want to do that week in and week out. So I think what they're just doing is planning on, they're going to probably have a lot. I always say that with New England when Tom Brady was there, is they use the short passing game a lot as the running game, as de facto running game. And I'm sure they're going to do that with Tua, but they also have guys like Will Fuller that now can get deep and let Tua go throw it. So I think, if Tua's a mixed bag, we saw it last year, but there were some good things there, and obviously they believe in him. If he can throw some rushing in as well, he could be a sneaky surprise in fantasy where he's suddenly knocking on that QB1 door. I mean, there's everything in place for it. It just, has to kind of coalesce.
Definitely one of the best QB2 targets. Definitely a guy to be looking at in Superflex leagues. We've talked about it so much on this show, how streaming quarterbacks is nice in theory, but so many people in regular leagues are drafting backup quarterbacks, and Tua does have the feeling with the way things are set up for him and the fact that all they did at the running back position was bring in Malcolm Brown to supplement what Myles Gaskin did for them a season ago. Like, this is going to be a team that, at least if we take what they've done the last two off seasons and just take that right at face value, feels like a team that really wants to win with its passing game offensively. So good news for Jaylen, or for Tua Tagovailoa. Those wide receivers going to be interesting.
Bad
to
news for one person. I
Who's the
thought
bad
Brandon
news?
I thought Brandon might bring it up because it's like, I know what Jake thinks because you keep reading all my stuff. But be hesitant on Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki was one of the highest slot tight ends last year. And oh, by the way, what does Jaylen Waddle do? That's his bag. So I'm legitimately concerned that Gesicki could take a step back, not only not be a next step breakout tight end, is actually be worse than he was last year.
Yeah,
I mean, from an opportunity standpoint, it couldn't get much better for him than it was last year.
Yes.
He's the guy I'm noticing in drafts right now that I'm just trying to figure out my way away from him.
Avoid him.
Even when it comes to his time on my rankings, and if he's the guy that I should be taking, I'm like, well, maybe I'll think about another position right now. It's kind of just don't want to, have to be put on the
somebody
spot.
else take him.
And even last year, right? I mean, he had a nice year last year, but even last year you had Adam Shaheen working in the mix. You've got Durham Smith. Like, it's not even like he's got 100% of whatever is there for Miami tight ends this season too. I like Mike Gesicki, the player.
Late in the season too, as you said, which couldn't get much better. Is like Parker's banged up at that point, and again, there's no pro Preston Williams. Your number one wide receivers, the risk. I was Isaiah Wright and Jakeem Grant was So just legitimate concerns for him.
Really quick,
love him.
Before we move on, you have Lynn Bowden written in there. I haven't even really been talking about him a whole lot. He did have a nice few games with Tua at the end of the year. is it just kind of a joker role for him? I mean, what do you guys
I would
think?
love to he does feel to me like much more of a real life piece for the Dolphins than a
Yeah,
fantasy
like
piece. For
Cordell
us.
Patterson. Everybody, like there's a few teams that are starting to do this now.
Yeah, he's going to make some plays.
Tavon Austin was before his time. Should have been
right. If only Tavon Austin were a decade younger, we could be talking about him as someone who's going to be a real life contributor to a playoff contending team. But that is not the case, obviously. But Lynn Bowden, interesting, and someone who I've been circling around to quite a bit as I've gotten late in my best ball drafts. Well, right now we've got a deal for you with HelloFresh. Of course, HelloFresh cuts out stressful meal planning and grocery store trips so you can enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. HelloFresh offers 50 menu and market items each week, including ready-to-eat salads, sandwiches, and soups. And there's something for everyone to enjoy with recipes designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity and just a wide range. So many different options, no matter what your diet, what you're looking for. HelloFresh has something, probably many somethings for you. Right now, if you go to HelloFresh.com/fantasy14, use the code fantasy14, you can get up to 14 free meals and free shipping. Again, that is HelloFresh.com/fantasy14 with the code fantasy14. You get up to 14 free meals and free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. All right, guys, next team that I want to talk about here is another team with a second-year quarterback, the Cincinnati Bengals. And we know a lot of this is going to hinge on what we get from Joe Burrow, how healthy Joe Burrow is at the start of the season and throughout the season. All reports we're getting from Cincinnati are good on Joe Burrow's knee. And right now we can really only have the conversation from an interesting point if we're assuming that Joe Burrow is basically Joe Burrow come week 1. This is a fun team because A.J. Green had 104 targets on this team last year that he did nothing with. I couldn't believe when I went and saw that number, 104 targets for A.J. Green. So it's not like they just have to jam Jamar Chase into a role that there isn't something there for when you vacate those 104 A.J. Green targets. But how does this work out, Jake? How do they best balance T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd?
Again, can we just make this the Panther show? Everything's the Panthers. Better version of Panthers. I think I saw it was either Rich Rebar or somebody like that yesterday tweeted it out. So if it wasn't Rich, sorry for the person who did and to give the credit where credit's due. But they were talking about how many pass attempts Burrow had before he went down. Then he was on pace for something ridiculous. It was like 670 or even 680. Yeah. Of course, I don't think we're expecting the Bengals to go that ballistic this year, like to Joe. Although extra game, maybe he's right back into that range again.
That defense is going to be bad again.
I think they've made some improvements, but yeah, you're right. It's still going to be a bottom 10 defense. There's no question about it. So I'd say 650 is a reasonable number. And could he surpass that? Absolutely. So 650. Now you're talking about the better version of the Panthers because again, what are we doing at tight end? You could have some excitement for Uzma, but he's kind of been I feel like Uzma's like the Irv Smith thing too, is okay, we always see the upside, but what's the realistic week to week? Mm-hmm. The realistic week to week is the 3 wide receivers and Joe Mixon. So that's the realistic side of it. And Joe Burrow can throw the ball 650 times in a year, especially with the extra game and then some. So if you want to talk about now ranking these guys, look, I'll say this. The reason I lean slightly towards Higgins over Jamar Chase is not because of the talent. I think Jamar Chase is a better talent, no question about it. I don't even think it's a debate. I think Jamar Chase was one of the best wide receivers in the past 10 years. He'd be inside probably the top 5. But what it comes down to is he's still a rookie. And yes, he's played with Joe Burrow before, but he's still a rookie. T. Higgins was in the league. And what did I say is about T. Higgins is I actually thought, and Brandon probably remembers this because he edits me, I actually thought Higgins was going to take at least a year, if not 2, to succeed in the NFL. Mostly because of his landing spot in A.J. Green, but also I thought he was a bit raw. He impressed me last year. So if you told me as of now, I'd probably go Higgins 1, Chase 2, super close, and Boyd 3 just because of the role Boyd plays, as he's kind of the slot guy, and that's where he makes the most damage. Although, for everybody poo-pooing on him, let's remember, with or without that whole is better with or without A.J. Green, blah, blah, blah. He's better with or without A.J. He's good, period.
He's good, yeah.
And he was great with Joe Burrow. I mean, he was absolutely he was the leading guy with Joe Burrow. But I think this is the Cowboys, but easier to or harder to kind of separate the receivers. I think you could just say that any one of these guys could be the number one guy. They all have to be kind of in the mid-20s at least on your rankings. And it's great for fantasy because there's just not a lot of branches here. I mean, Zuma is, he's somebody. He's just, he's gonna get it when they need it, but he's not someone that are really working into the game plan, week in and week out as somebody that has to be a major factor. So you got mixing those three guys, and they're gonna probably all get 100+ targets again, and touchdowns can be random, and that's probably going to be the separator between these guys.
No love for Drew Sample, you guys? You don't want to get it on the Drew Sample train?
He's a Washington Husky. I'll always have love for Drew
while we're on this team just for a second, we keep waiting, right? And we're not really talking about running backs here, but I do want to talk about Joe Mixon because we keep waiting for Joe Mixon to really take off in this passing game, and Giovanni Bernard getting in the way. But Joe Mixon had 26 targets last year in 5.5 games, something like that. So I think there's a window in between more, there's a big gap where Joe Mixon can have more targets than he's ever had before, but the Cincinnati Bengals running back position has fewer targets per game than they did with Giovanni Bernard there for all these years. So does Mixon mess things up, gum up the works at all for the wide receivers, or is this still just going to be an all-you-can-eat buffet for all these guys? Where you at on this, Jake?
I'm not concerned mostly because I actually don't know that Joe Mixon's going to be, I know like to talk about he's never coming off the field. But, there's also reports when you look at it in context, you also look at some of the other things they said, they want to get Samaje Perine more involved, which I don't expect it to be heavily in the passing game. But I think two of the most overlooked, and I've been super deep drafts, especially best balls and dynasties and keepers and everything like that. And if I'm going 20+ rounds in general, I think not only the draft pick of Chris Evans, but also the undrafted free agent in Puka Williams, who I think is a lot like Tariq Cohen, are significant factors to take in here. Yes, either one of them could not even make the team. They still have Travion Williams, who they drafted before, but Travion Williams, who was kind of a clone of Giovanni Bernard. There are options on this team that are better pure pass catchers than Joe Mixon is. They're not saying that Joe Mixon's a bad pass catcher. It's just those are their skills. Their skills, these guys are complementary pass catching running backs. Chris Evans actually is more around. I'm talking more about the two Williams right now. So if you talk about them, maybe I could see him getting 50 targets over the entire season, but that's not a huge increase, where I think it's just more about the fact of Joe Mixon staying healthy and a powerful offense. And that's really what, get Joe Mixon around 300 touches, and even if majority of them are rushing, I'm okay with it. So I'm not really concerned about him offsetting the passing game so much himself.
Yeah, I think we didn't bring up Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas as being someone that could gum up the receivers upside there. And I think, if Jake's talking that they're going to throw 600+ times, and there's really not a whole lot of other people to throw to other than those three wide receivers that we're talking about. If they want to throw to Joe Mixon or whatever running back kind of emerges as that, I just don't think that's going to impact anybody whatsoever. So, yeah.
Here you go. Tell me if I'm crazy. I already ran it. So again, I'm conservative on Joe, but I might, this is one of the things where I do projections. I might go back and be look, I'm going to change my own projections. I have Joe Burrow for 641 pass attempts. That's probably low, but even with that, I just want to put that out there. Even with that, have 127 targets going to T. Higgins, 120 going to Jamar Chase, and 119 going to Tyler Boyd. You still have 49 for Uzma, and Joe Mixon still gets 57. I was actually surprised I have it that high for Joe Mixon, but that's with 18 for P. Ryan and 19 for Travion, and then another 6 sprinkled in for Puka. The Brandon's point is it's fine. Even if it's 4 people, it's such a concentrated offense that it's still going to be fine for the wide receivers. And by the way, that's what the 49 going to Auden Tate too, as the 4th wide receiver. There's going to be targets for the big 3, no question, no matter how you cut it up.
And that's what makes this offense fun, is that there are so many ways to invest in the passing game, and nothing costs you anything crazy, whether it's Chase, Higgins, Boyd, even Burrow.
Chase, by the time we get to the 3rd week of August, is going to be priced so high. Brandon. How many times am I going to say Brandon knows this? Saw the mailbag last week. Somebody, no, he was in the comments. It wasn't in the mailbag. He said, "How early is too early for Chase, Jamar Chase, 3rd round?" And I was like, 3rd round? Holy crap! Chill out, dude.
I actually saw this morning. Excuse me, that his NFFC ADP for June. I said it for June 1st through today is wide receiver 21. the top of these three
We're
guys.
already getting close to now. He has to be like one of the rookie sensations.
Man, it's going to be fun, but it's a fun way to invest. It's a good team to invest in. And, I think we could look at the Indianapolis Colts as a similar one. And I got the question there, right? You have T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman, Parris Campbell in year 3. We haven't really got a good look at Parris Campbell in his first 2 years. Michael Pittman in year 2 had a little bit of a pop last year. Didn't quite last as long as I think I can speak for myself and say I was expecting it to once he did emerge. And then ever reliable T.Y. Hilton finally getting to play with another quarterback that he can connect with deep down the field in Carson Wentz. And so there's like none of these. This is like a pitching staff that doesn't have an ace, but has like 3 to 4 good number 2, number 3s. Like that's what this feels like to me. And so I'm wondering, Brandon, when you look at these guys, how do you start thinking about attacking Hilton, Pittman, Campbell, this Colts wide receiver group in drafts?
Yeah, I guess, it's Michael Pittman. You can see the best combination of upside and the ability to be an inside-outside guy and kind of be just the go-to chain-moving receiver and maybe the biggest volume guy. You talk about T.Y. Hilton being paired to a quarterback that can hit him deep, but does Hilton still have that gear to get open deep? Is a question to me. And I think the biggest X factor here is I've always liked Parris Campbell and the idea of Parris Campbell. He just can't stay healthy. And I know that, he's been upset about that, of course, but this is kind of like, this is the year he has to do it or else he's just going to, I think, fade off into oblivion. Come on, 3 years in, you gotta stay healthy. If he stays healthy, he could be a steal. I think he could legitimately be a steal. He's a super talent. So I'm interested and I'm watching on Parris Campbell. I wonder also if Jack Doyle is going to be the guy. Would they bring in Zach Ertz? It seems to make a lot of sense given the Philly connections there. I think there's a move to be made for the Colts. I don't know that they're going to be what they are right now going into the season.
Jake, let me jump in really quick for a second and ask you to consider this too. And you can answer this question too, but think do you have those target numbers handy? Because I'm wondering, with this team built the way it is, and you have a high volume back in Jonathan Taylor, who's being drafted as a top 6-7 overall player, and you have Nyheim Hines playing the role that he plays in this offense. You have a good defense. You have a team that expects to compete for, something like they did last season. Are there concerning target numbers on these guys with the style of play we expect the Colts to have?
I wouldn't say concerning. I think the biggest concern is, what is Carson Wentz? Can he bounce back? If Carson Wentz bounces back and looks anything like the excitement we had a few years ago, when everybody was talking about potentially the next, MVP, great top 10 quarterback. And to be honest, if you even look at it, it's like those are good numbers pointing to an upswing, but it wasn't necessarily like top 5 numbers. But all that being said, is you can still throw the ball 580, 600 times, even in this offense, even with Jonathan Taylor running the ball 280 times. And you said, why do I, know those numbers ready? Well, why did I throw those numbers? Because those numbers are pretty close to what the projections are. I don't want to give it all away until they're out next month. But those are close to around what the numbers are. Oh, and by the way, with Taylor and Hines also combining for 100 targets out of the backfield themselves, you still have 100 for Hilton, 100 plus for Pittman, and 70 to 80 for Parris Campbell. Can those things change? Sure. And you also have potentially 4 tight ends, and that's even before we get to Zach Ertz as a potential trade catch. This is a team that is like the Vikings, also lots a lot of 12 sets. Actually ran a few 13 last year, which is just insane. But you have Doyle, you still have Ali Cox, they brought in Jordan Thomas, they drafted Kyle Granson, who's a rookie who I think is going to, a few years down the road, but they're already talking about, hey, he could be involved a couple times as a rookie. So there's just a lot of options here. I don't think it's the volume of the Bengals for these 3. You would kind of, just by those numbers alone, chop off about 10 to 15%, but they can still they're still all be value here. I agree with Brandon's biggest thing. If I took the most talented one, it would be Pittman. I think the interesting thing about Hilton is he showed last year late when he finally caught on. It was 2 things that was interesting about us. They started moving him around more, which helped. They kind of started and manipulating his routes a little bit instead of just being like, I'm just going to beat everybody deep. And the funny thing is because even though he started changing up his routes and his usage and his line of scrimmage, finding ways to get him quote unquote open, his air yards and distance actually went up because he had more of a threat. And, you get defenders starting to bite. So I think that the combination of that and Wentz is that Hilton could repeat last year and Pittman could be a guy. I'm hoping for Parris Campbell, like Brandon said. and all three of them could be fantasy relevant. But and I won't say the Panthers. This is not a Panther situation.
All right, one more question before we move on for this team. Is the over under wide receiver 29.5? Is the top scoring wide receiver over that, better than that? Wide receiver 29 or better, or worse than that? Wide receiver 30 or worse?
If you force me, would you say, Brandon?
I would say that Pittman will not finish top 30.
I think he said best wide receiver, so any of them.
Yeah, any of them.
That's my lead.
I'm with you. I would say if you gave me 34.5, I might say one. Maybe you could squeak in there, but I think you can see all three of them finishing between like wide receiver 35 and 50.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing anymore. Wide receiver 50
not at all.
last year is still starting on most teams every single week last year.
Yeah, right. If you're talking about 3 wide receivers and a flex spot in your starting lineup, then wide receiver 50 is going to be someone who at the very least is on a team for sure for the bulk of the season and is someone you think about playing in bye weeks as a worst case scenario, definitely.
Mike Williams, this is per game too. Mike Williams, Devontae Parker, Christian Kirk, Marquez, Valdez, Scantling, although his games are super inconsistent. But these are all wide receivers in the 40s to 50.
Yeah, and so there you go. So all these guys are going to have some role to play in the fantasy world. We're going to have to wait and see how that shakes out. Before we go to our next team, I want to talk about our second clue here for Guess That Player. So again, clue number 1 was I've been a top 15 wide receiver in half PPR scoring each of the last 3 years, topping out at wide receiver 8. Clue number 2.
Because you put him at wide receiver.
Wide receiver. Clue number 2 in that 3-year span. So in the 3-year span that this receiver has been a top 15 wide receiver every year, half PPR scoring, I've led my own team in yards and targets just once. He's led in yards multiple times. He's led in targets multiple times. But both in the same year, he has led just once in the 3 season. So that is clue number 2 for Guess That Player. And again, we are using this to give away a spot into SFB Scott Fishbowl 11 for this season. Let's move on to our next team here. This is Jake's team, Brandon, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's talk some Jaguars. DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, Travis Etienne, going to have a big role in the passing game. Trevor Lawrence, the next big thing at the quarterback position. I got to let you take this one first, Jake. I mean, there it is. Chark and Viska and Marv and Etienne. How does this all work out? Is this one of your pass on the cake, take the icing situations with Trevor Lawrence?
No. It's not. It's the icing or the pieces. It's the cake is the Trevor Lawrence is the cake. The quarterback's the cake.
Yeah, pass on the icing, take that makes a lot more sense actually.
Buy the cake, not the icing is my saying. So there you go. There you go. I'll get that on a shirt. Buy a cake, and I'll get RotoWear to put it.
Yeah,
like
get RotoWear on that.
I don't know how he throw away the icing on that, but the icing is still going to be valuable. Like here's what it comes down to. If I had to rank as of today, which I have, and I will continue to do so, obviously, I would go Chark, I would go Jones second, I would go Shenault third. At running back, I think we've talked about ad nauseum now is like Etienne, a lesser version of Kamara, still going to be valuable, but expect kind of like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, mid RB2. Maybe he gets into the high-end RB2 range as a rookie. But James Robinson is not going to go away. He's a better Latavius Murray, one you can actually use. So there's just the fact that there's a lot of pieces, and there's a lot of pieces with a coach who's trying to talk up everybody and get everybody involved every single day of the week. And it could just be a mess. What keeps coming to mind, and I don't think it's going to be this bad, obviously. What comes to mind is trying to do too much Chip Kelly. Like, stop. Like, look, the NFL is not college. We've seen coaches do this before. You can't make everything fun and super and everybody's going to get 80 touches a week and you're going to have 110 pass plays. Like, chill out, dude. You got to make some pecking order here and some semblance.
There's no Rutgers for Urban Meyer to go up against in the NFL.
No, there's not. You're not going to be putting up 60 points. Exactly. So I still put in that order, but the fact is like Chark has the best number 1 pure ability. I think Marvin Jones continues to be overlooked of how good he'll be with Trevor Lawrence and again his offense because he's Marvin Jones, because he's good every damn year. Marvin Jones just goes out and catches 900 yards and 8 touchdowns or somewhere around there every damn year. We could be excited about Laviska Shenault, but I have a feeling that even if you're manufacturing touches, okay, are you going to give him to him out of the backfield? Because then what are you doing James Robinson, Travis Etienne? Like, there's just one ball, only so many things you can do. So I think the Shenault price right now is way too high. And I'll give you a perfect example because this was in the mailbag too. And I said, go field trade offers. I tweeted about it. I said, all this hype about Shenault, now is your time because People are paying out the nose. Somebody tweeted me back and said, took your advice. I got Kenny Galladay and a 2022 second rounder for Laviska Shenault. Like, that's how you take advantage of these situations. Shenault, even at best case, still probably only brings back that trade value.
Yeah, I feel like that if this was not Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow there, and suddenly all the attention is on Jacksonville, like if Trevor Lawrence just gets drafted by Houston, like, you know, there's a bunch of opportunities for guys that would be good draft values in the end. But right now, because everybody's just getting in on Jacksonville, they're just taking all this potential sleeper value and just blowing it up right now. And so it's interesting because this is a team. How much better is this defense going to be? There's a lot of unknowns. I mean, they were the second worst in points allowed last year. It allowed Jacksonville to throw the seventh most time in the league, but their actual fantasy production at the quarterback position was like 25th. So, like, you know, can Trevor Lawrence, the quality of passing can really improve the overall numbers of all these recipients that are going to get getting the ball. But is the defense going to be better? The question of Urban Meyer getting too cute and running things differently. And then if it's a traditional kind of like setup that they had like last year, man, I mean, you would think that seventh most passes again, you're going to get, you know, top 15 level overall production from the quarterback position just in general in fantasy. So there's just some X factors in here that are really hard to put your thumb on.
Yeah, as of right now, I only have 2 people in this team getting over 100 targets, and one of them's not Shenault. So there you go.
Right, but this was a team that threw 616 times last
year. Okay, and to that point, I'll give this one completely away. I have 660 attempts for this team. And I still only have 2 people getting over 100 targets just because, you know, Shenault's not that far off, but I'm just making the point.
Yeah. Another thing that I think factors in here with Shenault is that, like, you know, like, Jake, you're awesome at projections. You're just awesome in general, Jake. You're great at the projections. You know you're going to get some things wrong. That goes without saying. I think that Laviska Shenault being outside the top 2 on this team in targets is not something that you have a chance of getting wrong. Like, there would have to be an injury for Chark and Marv to not be top 2 on this team in targets. And so that is something else to think about when you're thinking about the down ticket items in this passing game. Jaguars, we know, are a team that has a quarterback change and a very good one. The Broncos, they could be a team that, first of all, they could be a team that just has a quarterback change, period. No matter what happens with Aaron Rodgers, they could be one that has a very good quarterback change if they do end up swinging a deal for Aaron Rodgers. Let's think about them, though, right now with Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater, whatever the case may be in Denver. The big addition coming back to this team, of course, is Courtland Sutton. Missed the entire 2020 season due to injury. So let's just start right at the top of the depth chart, Brandon. Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy? Who's the number 1 on this team?
I would say Courtland Sutton. I could actually see potentially just with the way their roles are, and if it's Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, that maybe Jerry Jeudy ends up getting more targets. But I think just in terms of, you know, the quality of the target, like, it should be close. Courtland Sutton's going to get the ball deeper downfield, air yards wise, going to likely score more touchdowns. I would give the lean to Courtland Sutton on that.
Yeah, completely agree. I actually have their targets very close together, but more yards, more touchdowns, just more for Courtland Sutton. Obviously, the bigger question with Sutton is how healthy is he coming off an injury? But we are, you know, as of today, we have to go into this assuming a lot of things. You know, we could go back to Joe Burrow. All the reports are he's fine for week 1. It's not 100% a given. So there's a lot of things out there, but yeah, I agree 100% with Brandon. It's Sutton, and it's kind of even though the targets are super close, it's probably, I'd say, a half tier, if not to a full tier gap for me for Sutton to Jeudy. People forgot how good Sutton is. People forgot that this guy was like, everybody was ready to throw him inside the top 10 next year.
But yeah, right. I mean, we were talking. Jerry Jeudy is going to be better, and the whole drops thing, I don't expect that to be something that he just carries with him year in and year out, that stigma. I think he'll be better as well. And KJ Hamler was up there in drops, and you kind of have to start looking at quality of the targets, and Drew Lock has to figure into that a little bit as well in the conversation. So anyways, just something to think about.
Well, I wanted to bring up 2 more obvious guys in this offense. Let's start with KJ Hamler, since you just mentioned him, Brandon. Is there a fantasy relevant role for him to play alongside those 2 receivers? And then, of course, Noah Fant, the other guy. But let's try to keep this targeted on KJ Hamler. We've got Jake doing a Frank the Tank move up there. Like, is there a fantasy relevant role for KJ Hamler this season?
Maybe. Here's what I'm thinking, though. I get back to this idea that this is a good defense. Well, look, this is a good defense who got the ultimate game manager now that Alex Smith is no longer in the league. The ultimate game manager now is Teddy Bridgewater. And you got Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, a two-pronged backfield. You have a good defense, and you have a suspect quarterback position. I mean, what makes sense to me is ground and pound and play good defense and win games that way. And this is not a high-volume passing game. And so that would worry me in terms of KJ Hamler. Is there a role? Yeah, he fits right in there. Fits right in there as that third wide receiver working the slot and having a role. But I would worry about the consistency week in and week out if it does end up going the direction of Teddy Bridgewater. If Aaron Rodgers comes in, game on. It's a whole different story.
Yeah, it's fun. I can't really disagree too much as I just love KJ. I'm a sucker for Penn State wide receivers. Can you tell? But they just year after year, they put up wide receivers all the time. Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. Sorry, Deshaun Hamilton, KJ Hamler. like it just continues to happen. But no, look, Brandon, you're right. As much as I can be excited, I'm just more excited to see what Hamler can do over a full season. I actually think Teddy would be better for Hamler, for that season. But 70. Maybe 80 targets, because we still didn't even talk about, as you said, Noah Fant. We're focusing on KJ Hamler. There's still a pecking order here, and Hamler, even surpassing Tim Patrick because he fits better in that slot situation, would still be fourth in the pecking order, and that's without even including the backfield as a combined target share themselves, which you could argue that might even be contention with Hamler for fourth.
Let's get into Noah Fant here, Jake. Top 10 tight end ADP, probably going to stay there. Is there enough here? Is there enough here for him? And can he, I guess maybe the better question with Noah Fant is, can he force his way to where we are talking about this as a, two receivers and a tight end, all of whom command a big target share, one of those brands of teams?
No, I think Fant falls into exactly what he did last year. And that he wasn't even a tight end one season. I don't really see him getting 100 plus targets. And if he does, that's not, what do you have, 91, 2, 3, somewhere around that last year. So it's not even a huge enough jump. Yeah. So I think Fant's fine. I think that you're talking about, yes, he didn't finish as a tight end one, but you're also talking about the inconsistency of the position. You're looking at some of the people that finished in front of him last year, and nobody would say, oh yeah, I'm going to definitely draft whatever, I'm trying to think there's somebody ridiculous that finished right in front, like Hayden Hurst. We're not taking Hayden Hurst in front of him. We're not drafting Jono in a split situation. We're not thinking that Jimmy Graham's going to eclipse and repeat that touchdown success. So he deserves to be a tight end one, but it's more because his floor is better than most once you get into that range. I wouldn't take Fant near the top 7 or 8 though.
Yeah, don't have a whole lot to add. He's not someone I'm going into drafts targeting. He's someone that I might end up having to settle with, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Fant or Gesicki?
Fant.
I'm on that train too. Are you also?
Yeah,
that's
fine.
The water.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So hey, that's where we leave the Broncos. I've got a third clue for you on this guess that player. So the third clue, last year I had 5 games with fewer than 6 points in half PPR scoring. Fewer than 6 points in half PPR scoring 5 times last season. Yet, of course, as we know from clue number 1, was still a top 15 wide receiver. So the 3 clues again, I've been a top 15 wide receiver in half PPR scoring each of the last 3 seasons. I cause the fire trucks and ambulances to go by Beller's window when he talks about me. That's a bonus clue. The next clue, in that 3-year span that I've been a top 15 wide receiver, I've led my team in yards and targets just once in the same season. And then clue number 3, last year I had 5 games with fewer than 6 points and half PPR scoring. We will talk about that player as we wrap the show up, at a couple more teams I want to talk about first. And that first one.
Can I get
nope,
one more
that's
clue?
it.
No, it's 3 clues.
You're out.
3 clues.
You are out.
I think I know who it was from the first one. The second one made me hesitate, and the third one made me come back to my original guess. This is going to be interesting when we get to it.
Yeah, the second one's actually made things a little. I was surprised to see that was true when I was looking up.
Well, if you said that surprise, that makes me feel better about my guess, but we'll see.
Hey, Jake.
Yes.
How about the New York Giants? Let's talk about these guys. I'm circling back to the same question I asked at the top of the show, right, with the Arizona Cardinals. It was DeAndre Hopkins, and then what do we think about this Giants team? They got Kenny Galladay. They still have all the dudes that they had last year, right? Darius Slayton's there. Sterling Shepard, he's there. Evan Ingram, he's there. So what happens on this team, Jake, beyond Kenny Galladay?
Sterling Shepard is a tremendous value right now because Sterling Shepard goes back to what Sterling Shepard should be doing and playing the majority of his time out of the slot, similar to like Kirk and Jeudy going into the second year and people we've talked about like Henry Ruggs and Jalen Reagor and stuff. A lot of these guys, you can succeed outside. You're not going to play 100% of your snaps out of the slot. Nobody does. But similar to all these type of wide receivers is you can succeed outside when we move you around and there's situations there. And you're not always targeted when you're playing outside. Sometimes it's just a lineup to keep things moved around and the plays are going elsewhere anyway. The real appeal is we've seen the numbers for Shepard. If anybody's ever looked them up, and the biggest thing will probably be in my bounce back article. So if you want to wait for that, that'll be the numbers if you don't want to go look them up yourself. There's a stark difference between Shepard in the slot and not in the slot. Kenny Golladay is going to be Kenny Golladay. I actually have concerns that he might take a step back with Daniel Jones because Kenny Golladay is not a separating wide receiver. You don't have to be. Des Bryant was never great at separating, but he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL at the time. Kenny Golladay, as we saw with Matthew Stafford, can be a terrific wide receiver and a great fantasy option. Problem is Daniel Jones is going to have to get more confidence throwing into a covered wide receiver, and he hasn't shown that ability yet or to put it in the right spot for that type of accuracy. Daniel Jones could easily bounce back this year as well as quarterback, but what it comes down to is it's Golladay and Shepard for me. I think the rest is going to be a mess. Slayton surprised everybody. Like Slayton 2 years ago is not that good of a wide receiver in the NFL. It just a lot of things broke right, and a lot of the attention now being on him. In best case scenario is another Mike Wallace to bring him up again, or Torrey Smith or something like that. So he's going to be fighting with Evan Ingram, as Brandon said with Jeudy. I don't think is going to have the drop issues he had last year. It's not like he's Eric Ebron. That's not like what Ingram's been building off of. He's better than that. So, but Ingram's involved. Slayton's involved. They drafted Tony. They want to get him some usage again, better real life than fantasy. But that's three guys before we even get to the fact that Saquon Barkley is going to involve 70, maybe 80 targets himself. So those are the only two wide receivers I'm really interested in. I think it's just going to be a mess every single week, including at tight end position.
Yeah, and I've seen Sterling Shepard go insanely low. Sometimes just barely.
He's free.
Yeah, sometimes he's barely even drafted. If I'm thinking back, I think I've been in some leagues where he hasn't even been drafted, but and that's on me because I should have been one of those that drafted. But I do still like him. I do agree that he's being undervalued, and it's weird. I think Kadarius Toney being a guy that that we expect is going to work in the slot, maybe dragging the value down. But man, if you're following kind of the news on Kadarius Toney, sounds like he's already a little bit of a basket case of being aloof and having like these reasons for coming up for not being able to practice and stuff. So he's getting off to a terrible start. I have a kind of a feeling that Kadarius Toney is ending up going to be kind of a wasted first year, and that his time is beyond 2021. So I'm with you. And the interesting thing about Kenny Golladay, he's never been a guy that's demanded a whole lot of volume. Like even in Detroit when he put up his huge numbers, it was like 60-some catches. Right. It's so Sterling Shepard really can be the clear winner here in terms of target volume, and Kenny Golladay can still get his, but on a lot less targets. So not a whole lot more to say. Just gonna put an exclamation point on what you did say.
All right, let's stick in that division for our last team, the Washington Footballs. One more year of calling them the Or is it 2 more years? Did they say something?
It's one more officially, and they still have.
Yeah, but
they haven't chosen the name though, right? Like we don't know what it is.
Yeah, right. I get them in Cleveland and baseball mixed up, and who's at what stage of their.
I'm on board for Red Wolves. I think that'd be pretty cool.
I'm cool with that too, but I would like. I'm happy that we get to trot out footballs for one more season.
Just not football club. That sounds like a soccer team. Like stop.
Yes,
that's terrible. All he did was change one name. He changed team to club. Like
it would not be good. And I actually, so I like soccer. I actually hate when I hate MLS teams trying to mimic European soccer team names. Right? Like it's.
Which was the one that dropped club and everybody rioted? What was the one?
We don't call it football in this country.
There was a huge one. Do you know what I'm talking about? You said you follow soccer. What was the one that changed their name and everybody went ballistic and they changed it back 1 week later because they dropped the club?
No. Well, the Chicago Fire did something with their logo, but not with their team name.
This was somebody dropped the club off the name. Anyway.
No. I like soccer. I didn't say I follow it that closely. I like it. I like watching the Euro Cup.
I'm watching the Euros. Oh, wait. Can you call it plural Euros? I'm watching money on my TV.
Yeah, there you go. So that's good. That's good. I think we can leave it there. Let's talk about the Washington football team and their passing game. Is this sort of simple, Brandon? Is this what I've got right here? Terry McLaurin, a little bit of a step down. Curtis Samuel, maybe same level or a little bit of a step down in Logan Thomas. And we know that J.D. McKissic, Steven Sims, they're going to be involved. Diami Brown, they used a third-round pick on. He's going to be involved in some way. But is this McLaurin, Samuel, Thomas, and we can forget about the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be room for someone other, than these guys to develop a Sims or a Harmon or a Diami Brown. I mean, I put my money on Diami Brown, maybe, a slow start, but maybe in someone that we could be interested mid-season or so. There's room there, but yeah, I think in terms of hierarchy, it's pretty clear. It's McLaurin, Samuel, and Thomas in that order for sure. And I would expect that they're going to try to work in Antonio Gibson in the passing game more and maybe dial back on J.D. McKissic as a thing, and making Antonio Gibson more of a fully featured bell cow type and not being just he's got the skills, and I think they're working towards. Ron Rivera's thrown out the random kibble to us, which is, it reminds me a lot of, Christian McCaffrey. So you kind of feel like the idea is that he wants to kind of, form him into that kind of a role eventually, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, actually, so inside information, I did Ben Standard's podcast for like 2 weeks ago for the Washington football team. And I'm glad because a lot of it was, they have the inside information. They're out there watching one specific team. Like that's the biggest thing is we're covering 32 and, then some depending on what other factors are out there. But, he's focused on the one. And I saw what the good thing is he agreed with a lot of the assumptions, quote unquote, I'm making with projections and the fact that it is very clear. It is McLaurin and then Curtis Samuel. And that's going to be great with Ryan Fitzpatrick now at quarterback versus the mess that they had last year. Yes. And nothing you could look at was
and
like
the year before. And maybe
Fitzpatrick is a definitive upgrade. And that's why I think Brown is interesting. But what we talked about, one of the things is Brown is not a guarantee. He probably would be the one that they would like to see step into the number 3. But you mentioned Harmon, who honestly probably doesn't even make the team at this point because there's a better likelihood that Gandy Golden, who they just drafted, who has that similar big play or move the change, red zone presence upside. I knew there was
someone I forgot in there.
Yeah. Well, and you forgot the other Sims too. They have Cam Sims and Steven
Sims.
I said Simses.
And then they brought in Adam Humphries, who, if healthy, is a slot receiver who's proven himself time and again to be a slot. They are probably cutting 3 wide receivers, and it's going to be names that are these are one of the ones that's going to be like post cuts. Could be like, ooh, I'm interested to see where he lands. Yeah. All that being said, is the biggest thing that comes with Fitzpatrick too is you're right. It's going to be 1-2. It's going to be Logan Thomas, probably number 3, and then the 4th being the wide receiver. But the biggest hit is McKissic. I think you see more involvement for Gibson in the passing game because they want to. And that's the funny thing is his rookie season was exactly the opposite of what we all, there was nobody out there who said Gibson was going to be primarily a runner after being primarily a pass catcher in college, because the big question was, he's played so few snaps at running back. Is he going to be able to succeed? Fitzpatrick doesn't throw to the running backs a lot his entire career. And you're going to take away that if Gibson gets that uptick. McKissic, in my opinion, right now, I'm not even looking at McKissic, even in full PPR. I have no interest for where he's going because I think he's rounds lower than his ADP right now.
I love one of the things I love about fantasy football. There are a lot of things I love about fantasy football, but one of them is that I love that there's always going to be that random dude. Last year, J.D. McKissic, in full PPR leagues, J.D. McKissic was locked in as a starter.
He fell into a great situation too. It was McLaurin nothing.
Yeah. Well, McLaurin and nothing. Just like, it was
Smith,
beautiful.
Wheelhouse.
Yeah. Right? And so that's awesome.
Hey, don't forget Tyler Heineke. Come on. Yeah. Heineke played probably the best football of any of their quarterbacks last year.
Yeah, Taylor Heineke almost knocked off the eventual Super Bowl champions in the first round of the playoffs. So could have been having a much different story there. But yeah, just like I love that. Like 2020 J.D. McKissic will never be remembered unless you had him. Like someone rode J.D. McKissic into the playoffs, and it's awesome. It's why we love this, and we also love guessing players with pieces of trivia. So let's pay that off here. We're gonna guess that player. Remember, this is part of our Scott Fish Bowl 11 giveaway. If you're still with us, be sure to get in on that. What you're going to do here is you're going to guess the player. You're going to give us a rating and a review wherever you listen to us on podcasts.
Preferably
screenshot that. Guess the player. Definitely want it to be a 5-star review and a really glowing review about how great my voice sounds and all that. And then tweet it to us at MBeller, at Allenkid, at Brandon Funston. We'll give away a slot in Scott Fish Bowl by Thursday. So again, our 3 clues for Guess That Player. Clue number 1. I've been a top 15 wide receiver in half PPR scoring each of the last 3 seasons. Clue number 2, in that 3-year span, I've led my own team in yards and targets just one time. Clue number 3, last year I had 5 games with fewer than 6 points in half PPR scoring. Who we got here? Who is the wide receiver?
I think
Yeah,
I
Brandon,
know it. So you want to go
No,
first, Jake?
you always go first. I'm going to go first this time.
That's okay. I was going to let you go first. I had a fourth clue, too. You want the fourth clue? Might solidify it for you. You can tell me if it changed your mind or not. He had 3 games of 27 or more points.
Sounds about right.
Does he play for your team?
He might.
I was going to go. The first clue was going to be Tyler Lockett. The second one threw me off, and then the third one brought me back to Tyler Lockett.
I think it's Tyler Lockett.
It is Tyler Lockett.
The second one threw me off. I'm like, really? Only once? But then when you said the third one about how many few games under that, I was like, no, it's got to be Tyler Lockett.
He led the Seahawks in yards and targets in 2019. Last year, Metcalf led them in yards. 2018, Doug Baldwin led them in targets. Mm-hmm. Doug Baldwin had 73
and that's what was throwing me off. I
couldn't.
Doug Baldwin feels like he's been gone longer than that. That's why.
Yeah. His 73 targets in 2018 were enough to lead the team. Tyler Lockett had 965 yards and 10 touchdowns on 70 targets in 2018.
Hey, I got one. I didn't get the last one, and then I got the first one right, but I got it wrong.
Lockett down for, Jake? How many targets you got Tyler Lockett down for this year?
Well, what is I mean, what do we make of Tyler Lockett? I mean, we set 6 games with fewer than 5 points.
You know what Tyler Lockett is now?
27. What do we make of him this year?
He's Will Fuller, or what Will Fuller used to be. Is you enjoy the 4 amazing games, get frustrated with 6 terrible ones, and the rest of the season is kind of like, all right, I got my fringy wide receiver too. So that's Tyler Lockett. This is what it comes down to. To answer your question, Brandon, I actually have 76 targets going to Gerald Everett, and I still have Disley being involved. And yet, even with that, because this is such a funneled offense, I'll have Tyler Lockett with 126, and that's with Eskridge getting 53. This is what I asked you guys the question. I said, what was the wide receiver total for the third wide receiver on that team last year? It was 37 targets for more.
Nuts.
Yeah. It is a different offense completely. It's a wholesale changes on the offense.
Yes.
But I think 127 targets sounds about right. I mean, I
have 53 for Eskridge. I have close to 40 for Disley still being involved. I have Freddie Swain still getting some. I have Rashad Penny getting a handful because he's back finally. Speaking of people staying healthy, can we just?
There's a decent chance he's not. Doesn't sound like he's all the way healthy, and there's.
I know already.
He could get cut, and they're talking because he makes almost $2 million. They might cut him. So DJ Dallas and Travis Homer time again.
Well,
it could be the Josh Johnson love that we've seen, like Brandon Howard and a couple guys on our site say
Or how about the fact that
next James Robinson?
There's still the Duke sitting out there.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
Duke.
it's
true. It's true. I mean, yeah, could make some sense.
You got to get Rashad Penny and Kristen Michael into the same room after
just mush them together with like some Play-Doh and like turn them into. By the way, just in case for Mike, I don't know. You said by Thursday. I think he's gonna take him by Thursday night. He might announce on Friday, just in case. I don't know. Or are you announcing the Scott Fish Bowl winner? Are you announcing it?
No. I'm passing it on to Scott.
Okay, just in case you don't see it Friday night, he might be or Thursday night. He might be announcing it on Friday. So I don't know. I just want to put that out there so people aren't like, "Oh, what the hell? You said Friday. You said Thursday."
That reminds me. Can I tell you what the wrinkle is this year? And
I'm
go ahead. Curious to get Jake's take on it. So
everybody's
you don't have
to
draft on it. You don't have to draft a kicker, but you can actually plug a kicker in to a flex spot
at your flex.
So, and I was looking at it was Daniel Carlson averaged 9 points per game last year, which was. God, who was the receiver? It's like Christian Kirk. It's like plugging Christian Kirk into your flex
It's like
spot.
plugging in a wide receiver 5.
Yeah.
Are there yardage
like
bonuses?
That.
Is it 5?
Then you don't have to draft a kicker, but if you need to get some help through the bye weeks, I kind of like it. It's an option.
I kind of like that too, actually. Is it yardage bonuses? Is it like 5 points for a 53-yard field goal?
Here's the thing. I don't even need to look, but here's the problem with it.
I'm not sure.
This is going to be, and I already know what's coming. I'm ready for it, but I'm just going to ignore everybody because here's the fact. It's going to be like, haha, I won this week. No, because it's going to be like, haha, I won this week with 2 kickers in my flex spots. Yeah. But what it's going to come down to is it's confirmation bias. Is nobody's going to remember the 5 weeks where you didn't win because go look at even Carlson. I don't even need to pull them up myself. Go look at the top 3 kickers. Go look at how many games they failed to talk about Tyler Lockett. Go look at how many games they failed to score 5 points. Or 6 points compared to Tyler Lockett. Oh, by the way, at least Tyler Lockett will score you 25 in a week. So It's a wide receiver 5. If you want to plug him in for a wide receiver 5 because there's bye weeks or something like that, be my guest. But all people are going to do is going to be like,
yeah,
oh,
I don't think you
kickers.
craft a strategy around kickers as like a thing.
Oh, they're already doing it because I get tweeted on all of them. Everybody wants to CC me on them and be like, haha, where are you now? Somebody was already like, I'm going to start 5 kickers against Jake when I face him. Like, go right ahead, please.
I can't wait for the first time you get a Rodrigo Blankenship versus KJ Hamler question.
It's already going to happen. I know it's coming.
Perfect, actually.
All right. And on that great note, we are going to call it a show here on this episode of the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, giving away the Scott Fishbowl spot. Rate and review. Take a screenshot. Send us that answer to guess that player. Put it on Twitter at Miller, at All In Kid, at Brandon Funston. Start as many kickers as you want if you win that spot to Scott Fishbowl 11. We will be back with you next week. Until then, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a good week. Get those kickers.